America is entering a phase no one thought could happen. Restaurants, a symbol of American culture, are disappearing across the map. Not because people stopped eating out, not because the food got worse, but because of something far more brutal. Operating costs have risen beyond the point of survival even for the strongest restaurants. From New York to Miami, from Seattle to Philadelphia, the same scene appears. Windows covered with brown paper, signs turned off, and neighborhoods that were once vibrant now unusually silent. Today, we're stepping into the top 10 U.S. cities being pulled into the biggest restaurant crisis of 2025, where every closed door is a warning sign for the entire national economy. 10. New York City. Once a place where a small diner could become a legend, where a family restaurant could survive multiple recessions, and where millions believed food would forever remain the heartbeat of urban life. But stepping into 2025, the biggest heart of America's F&B industry is slowing down. Streets that once glowed every night are dimming. And the reason isn't that New Yorkers have changed their taste. It's that operating costs have risen beyond what most restaurants, from family-owned spots to major chains, can endure. New York is now the most expensive city in America, and for restaurants, this is no longer a statistic. It is a business sentence. Rents in Manhattan and Brooklyn have risen 30 to 50% in just a few years, leading many owners to say, customers still come, but the rent eats all the profit. Ingredient costs haven't stayed still either. From beef and cooking oil to vegetables, cumulative increases from 2022-2025 have reached 10-22%, wiping out already paper-thin margins for small business models. The next blow comes from labor. New York has one of the highest minimum wages in the nation, and for many casual restaurants, staffing accounts for 30-35% of total costs. They cannot cut workers and cannot keep raising menu prices forever. So many owners have had to make a decision they once thought they would never face, closing their doors. But all of that is still not the strongest blow. It is the shift in consumer behavior that is shaking the market. Nearly half of Americans say eating out is becoming too expensive to maintain. And New Yorkers, who are used to eating out more than cooking, are also being forced to tighten their spending. When purchasing power drops, revenue falls week by week, and a restaurant that survives on daily cash flow simply cannot exist in an environment where costs are climbing this fast. Even major chains are beginning to withdraw from New York. Some national brands have closed locations in Manhattan, while many independent restaurants that once appeared in newspapers or were mentioned by Michelin have quietly disappeared. When both large chains and family-owned restaurants cannot survive in the same market, that is no longer a sign of temporary turbulence. It is a sign of a structure breaking. And because of that, New York is witnessing something few thought they would ever see. Food streets that were once the busiest in America now show more for lease signs than menus. Dark windows even during peak hours. Empty seats in places where people once had to wait 45 minutes to get in. New York isn't collapsing because of a lack of customers. New York is collapsing because the city's own costs have risen beyond what any restaurant, no matter how good, can withstand. Even the food capital of America has to slow down in 2025. And that is a signal that what is happening to New York will not stop at New York. 9. San Francisco was once a symbol of sophistication in American dining. A city where every hill had a restaurant tied to the memories of its residents, where family-run establishments survived through 3 generations, and where a Michelin plaque on the wall was nothing unusual. But by 2025, The very cradle of high-end culinary standards is sinking into a wave of closures that is quiet yet fierce. Not just a few scattered places. Entire neighborhoods, commercial clusters, and restaurant rows that once buzzed with life are slowly disappearing. San Francisco has long been among the most expensive cities in the United States, but in recent years, operating costs have pushed beyond what the F&B industry can withstand. Rent in many areas has surpassed $70 per square foot, a price point that forces even busy restaurants to race against losses. Many business owners say they are not closing because they lost customers, but because they cannot keep paying just to stay open. And when rent rises faster than revenue, even stable restaurants no longer have a path to survival. Labor cost is the second blow. California is among the states with the highest minimum wage in the nation, and San Francisco's is even higher than the statewide rate. For small restaurants, payroll accounts for 35 to 40% of total operating costs, a ratio no traditional business model can withstand without raising prices. But raising prices risks losing customers, especially as Bay Area residents are tightening their spending, because the cost of living across the city has exceeded what many middle-class families can handle. Food and ingredients are also caught in the spiral of rising costs. The Bay Area relies heavily on imported goods and long-distance transportation, making everything from meat and seafood to produce more expensive than the national average. As food inflation stretched from 2022 to 2025, many restaurants lost their profit margins entirely. A plate of salad or a bowl of noodles may look simple, but the cost to produce them has risen to a level that cannot be offset by the selling price. But what makes San Francisco's collapse particularly severe is the urban risk factor. Property crime, rising security costs, and soaring insurance premiums. Several insurance companies have left California, pushing small business premiums to levels that are impossible to afford. Some restaurants have had to spend more than their profits just to maintain an insurance contract, and no one can survive long under those conditions. The saddest part is this: even highly rated restaurants, including former Michelin-starred establishments, have been forced to close. This is no longer the story of small, struggling eateries. This is a broken system where even the highest standard models cannot withstand the pressure of the city's economy. When you walk through the Mission, Soma, or the streets around Civic Center, you'll see "for lease" signs appearing more frequently than restaurant signs. Dark windows during dinner hours, empty tables in places that once required a reservation weeks in advance. San Francisco does not lack culinary talent. It does not lack tourists. It does not lack residents who love to explore new dishes. But none of that can defeat the relentlessly rising costs month after month. San Francisco is not losing its culinary culture. San Francisco is being eroded by an economic structure that makes restaurants unable to survive. What do you think is causing restaurants in San Francisco to collapse the fastest? Leave a comment. Many others want to hear your story too. 8. Los Angeles is not collapsing because it lost customers. Los Angeles is collapsing because it has become a city where operating costs rise faster than the ability to earn money. Los Angeles has long been considered the multicultural culinary center of the United States, a place where every neighborhood has a restaurant that tells the story of the community living there. But moving into 2025, even a city famous for its entertainment-driven lifestyle and high consumer spending is witnessing a widespread wave of restaurant closures. Not because of a lack of demand, but because the pace of rising costs has exceeded the ability of most F&B models to adapt. Commercial rents in LA have increased more than 50% compared to the pre-pandemic period, pushing rent levels to a point that many restaurant owners describe as eroding all profits. At the same time, extreme heat has caused the electricity bill of a medium-sized restaurant to exceed $30,000 per month, a number that cannot be reduced in an industry heavily dependent on cooling and industrial equipment. Labor costs remain a major barrier. California's minimum wage is among the highest in the country, making labor expenses account for 30–35% of total costs, leaving many restaurants struggling to continue operating. Meanwhile, Los Angeles residents are tightening their spending because living costs are rising faster than income, causing the number of dining out occasions to drop noticeably. Revenue falls while expenses rise. That is the formula for a wave of closures. Urban risks cannot be ignored. Certain areas in LA have seen an increase in property crime, forcing restaurants to pay more for insurance and security. Some businesses report that insurance premiums have risen by up to 70%, making it nearly impossible to stay in operation. Even large chains, despite having substantial resources, are downsizing their systems to reduce losses. Walking through Hollywood, Koreatown, or downtown LA today, it's easy to spot darkened windows, places that used to be packed with diners every night. As Ernest Hemingway famously said, "Things happen gradually, then suddenly." And Los Angeles is experiencing exactly that. What do you think is causing restaurants in Los Angeles to collapse the fastest? Leave a comment. Your real-world perspective could help many others better understand this situation. 7. Chicago, Illinois. Doesn't lose restaurants because the market changed. Chicago loses restaurants because the neighborhoods that once held the community together are slowly becoming hollow. Chicago is unlike any other city on this list. New York is crushed by costs. San Francisco is worn down by rent. Los Angeles is strangled by living expenses. And Chicago? Chicago faces something deeper: the economic hollowing out of entire communities, where small businesses that once anchored the neighborhood are now disappearing, leaving behind quiet streets that residents have grown used to seeing for years. In 2025, Chicago is witnessing a wave of restaurant closures spreading from the South Side and West Garfield Park to Englewood. Operating costs are rising fast, but revenue isn't keeping pace because these areas were already under economic pressure. Stagnant income, out-of-state migration, and sharply reduced spending from the working class. The restaurant industry, which relies heavily on local purchasing power, is therefore hit harder than in the wealthier coastal cities. Chicago's energy costs now exceed $32,000 per month for large restaurants, while commercial rent has risen about 40% over 4 years. Certain areas with high crime rates have seen insurance premiums skyrocket, forcing many small restaurants to close even though they still have loyal customers. Some owners admit that insurance alone has eaten up the entire annual profit margin. However, what makes Chicago truly unique isn't just the numbers, it's the social impact. Every restaurant that closes isn't just a business disappearing. It's the loss of a gathering place for the entire neighborhood. Family-owned restaurants, pizza shops, long-standing soul food spots. All of them are part of Chicago's culture that is slowly fading away. As writer Studs Terkel once said, "Chicago is a city of stories, and every shop here tells one." In 2025, far too many of those stories are being closed. Are you living in Chicago, or have you seen neighborhoods change in this way? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story may help others understand what's really happening. 6. Seattle, Washington. Seattle is undergoing a quiet restructuring. where restaurants have become the first victims of an economic ecosystem shifting direction. What sets Seattle apart from every other city on this list is not the number of restaurant closures, but the pattern of collapse occurring in layers. As tech companies cut back on office space, downtown Seattle has shifted from bustling to nearly empty at lunchtime. Hundreds of restaurants that once thrived on office workers no longer have regular customers, no longer have those 30, 40-person reservations that were common in 2018-2019. The shift in dining behavior is also accelerating the crisis. Seattle has seen online food orders rise by up to 65% compared to before 2020, making it impossible for many small restaurants to compete with cost-optimized chains. Many restaurant owners admit, it's not that we lack customers who actually sit down. Local costs have become increasingly unrealistic. Seattle's city taxes are among the highest in the U.S. Parking fees discourage locals from going out for dinner. And homelessness and unstable safety in the downtown area have forced many restaurants to close before 8 p.m. just to keep their staff safe. All of these factors weave together into a downward spiral. Once it begins, it is extremely difficult to stop. As economist Paul Krugman once said, "The real danger is not sudden collapse, but slow erosion that no one stops in time." 5. Denver, Colorado. Denver isn't collapsing because of a lack of customers. Denver is collapsing because costs are rising faster than any restaurant model can withstand. Denver was once considered the new F&B paradise of the West, a place where restaurants popped up every season. But by 2025, the story flipped. Countless restaurants from downtown to Aurora, Lakewood, and Thornton shut down all at once, not because revenue fell, but because operating costs surpassed their ability to survive. Industry reports for 2025, Axios, highlight 3 numbers that would shock any restaurant owner. Rent up 20 to 30% in 3 years. Labor costs among the highest in the Mountain West, pushing payroll to an unmanageable level. Ingredients plus logistics up 18 to 22%, wiping out any profit left on each plate. A 20-year restaurant owner in Aurora shared, "Our revenue stayed the same, but my electric bill went from $4,800 to $9,200 a month. That's when I knew I was done." That's the real issue. Denver's margins aren't shrinking, they're being erased. The shift in dining habits only makes the spiral worse. Fewer people dine in, takeout is rising, but not enough to cover operating costs. Areas that once thrived on office workers, like downtown Denver and Capitol Hill, are now empty at lunchtime. No steady foot traffic, no profit, no survival. The issue of regional inequality is also clear. Cherry Creek continues opening new high-end restaurants. But North Denver, South Aurora, and Lakewood are seeing more for-lease signs than restaurant signs. As economist Thomas Sowell once said, "There are no solutions, only trade-offs, and Denver is paying the price for high costs, overheated growth, and business models that no longer match the reality of 2025. Want to know which city is next facing a wave of restaurant closures? Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis. 4. The Bay Area doesn't lack money. The Bay Area lacks an environment where restaurants can survive. If San Francisco is the epicenter, then the entire Bay Area, Oakland, Berkeley, San Jose, Daly City, Redwood City, Palo Alto, is shaking with it. This was once the highest income region in the United States, but precisely because of those unrealistic costs, restaurants are being squeezed faster than in any other metropolitan area. Problem number 1, operating costs in the Bay Area have exceeded the limits of the F&B industry. According to 2025 business reports, Commercial rent up 25 to 40% in just 3 years. Minimum wages in many areas exceed 18 to 20-hour, inflating payroll. Insurance premiums up 40–60%, especially in Oakland, classified as a high-risk zone. Vandalism, property theft, and car break-ins forcing many restaurants to close early or increase security costs. In Oakland, a 35-year-old family restaurant closed after having its windows smashed 5 times in 10 months, and the repair bill exceeded $45,000, more than an entire year of profit. South Bay isn't doing any better. San Jose and Santa Clara are seeing rental costs climb to unthinkable levels, while customer volume drops as tens of thousands of tech workers shift to hybrid or remote schedules. Restaurants that once survived on employees from Google, Meta, and Apple are now so empty that many owners admit, "I didn't lose customers, I lost their lunch routine." The irony is that the wealthiest areas are the ones where restaurants are closing the fastest. Berkeley and Palo Alto are full of boutique cafes, but affordable restaurants, the ones serving the working class, older adults, and middle-income families, are disappearing from the map. Economist Joseph Schumpeter once warned, "Excessive prosperity often creates the conditions for its own collapse." That is exactly the story of the Bay Area in 2025. If you're living in the Bay Area or have seen familiar restaurants disappear, share what you're witnessing around you so everyone can understand what's happening. 3. Boston, Massachusetts. The intellectual city is losing the restaurants that once sustained it. Boston isn't lacking customers. Boston is lacking the ability to sustain a restaurant model that can stay alive. Boston used to be one of the most stable F&B markets in the United States, supported by universities, hospitals, and tech corporations. But moving into 2024-2025, the city has witnessed a massive retreat of restaurants, not because demand disappeared, but because operating costs have exceeded every limit. Commercial rent in Back Bay, Cambridge, and Somerville increased 15 to 25% within 2 years. Massachusetts's minimum wage, one of the highest in the nation, has pushed labor costs to their peak. Food prices in Boston have risen nearly 17%, especially fresh goods imported through the port. Added to that are commercial insurance and security costs rising sharply due to minor vandalism incidents in Downtown Crossing, Chinatown, and Mission Hill. A 20-year restaurant owner in South End stated bluntly, "I can't win in a game where every cost goes up except profit." Boston also carries a unique challenge few cities have: long, harsh winters that reduce revenue by 25 to 30% for many restaurants. Empty offices, as tens of thousands of employees switch to hybrid work, causing restaurants around the financial district to lose the lunch traffic that used to be their backbone. While Seaport and Newton are still doing well, Dorchester, Roxbury, and East Boston are now covered with "for lease" signs. Peter Drucker once said, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is acting with yesterday's logic." And Boston in 2025 is the perfect example of that. Are you living in Boston? Comment your area. Together, we'll map out the neighborhoods that are losing restaurants. 2. Miami, Florida. The tourism paradise is being drowned by costs. Miami isn't lacking tourists. Miami is lacking the ability for restaurants to survive amid costs that have surpassed all logic. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach once thrived on a constant flow of international and domestic visitors. But entering 2024-2025, the landscape changed so fast that even veteran restaurant owners couldn't keep up. Ingredient prices surged, commercial rent climbed, hurricane insurance reached record highs, and wages in Miami Beach and Brickell hit the highest levels in Florida. Every bill increased, except profit. The instability of tourism made everything worse. As international visitors declined and domestic tourists shifted to Orlando or Tampa, revenue for restaurants dependent on tourism dropped immediately. In Wynwood, South Beach, and Little Havana, many owners described their revenue as a free-fall curve. 1 month survivable, the next month unable to pay the electric bill. A longtime restaurant owner admitted, "Miami is still crowded, but costs are rising faster than any amount of customers can save us." And Miami is proving one thing. When costs and tourism move in opposite directions, restaurants are the first to lose. If you want to know which Florida city is hitting the next danger threshold, subscribe. You'll see the full picture. 1. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The heritage city is losing the restaurants that keep it alive. In Philadelphia, it's not that customers are abandoning restaurants. It's that restaurants can no longer survive amid rising costs. Philadelphia once had one of the most diverse food scenes on the East Coast. But from 2024 to 2025, a wave of closures spread across Center City, University City, Northern Liberties, and Kensington. Operating costs rose so quickly that even restaurants that had survived 15 to 20 years could no longer hold on. Rent kept climbing, food prices continued rising, and electric and heating bills stayed high every winter. Many owners said they are working just to pay bills, with no profit left to reinvest. Regional inequality makes the problem even worse. High-end restaurants in Rittenhouse are still lit, but just a few blocks away, you'll see windows covered in brown paper and signs gone dark. In North Philly and West Philly, the disappearance of a restaurant isn't just losing a place to eat. It's losing a piece of community life. And Philadelphia is gradually losing those touch points that define its identity. If you're living in Philly, comment your area so we can see clearly which neighborhoods are losing their restaurants. The 2025 restaurant crisis is not just the story of individual cities. It is a mirror reflecting the economic reality of America. When costs rise faster than income, when confidence falls faster than demand, and when the places that were once the busiest begin to go dark. A restaurant closing is not just the loss of a place to eat. It is the loss of jobs, the loss of memories, the loss of the rhythm of an entire community. And if this trend continues, the list of 10 cities today will not be the final list. Which city are you living in? Are you seeing restaurants around you disappear? Leave a comment. Your story could be the next signal on America's economic map.